Welcome back to Sledgehammer Horror, guys. I am Ken Sledge, and let's talk horror. Now, today I am joined by the beautiful Jackie Byers and Meredith Alloway. How are you doing today, ladies?
We're good.
Doing great. It's a good time for horror. Nope is out. I've been listening to all the podcasts, reading all of the interviews. So it feels like a good week for me.
Yeah. And Pray for the Devil trailer is playing in front of Nope.
It definitely is. Ashley and I were in the cinema and the trailer came on and I was like, I'm going to interview her.
All week I've been like secretly trying to be like, hey, to my boyfriend, like, do you want to go see Nope? And he's like, I don't know. And I'm like, I think you like want to. Without being like, I just want to go and see my trailer on a big screen.
Yeah, that's so cool, man. I'm so happy for you.
Thank you.
So yeah, I do want to talk a little bit about you guys before we actually get started on the reason why we're here. I want to start with you first, Meredith. Meredith is a writer, actress, and filmmaker. She has screened her films too. I don't know. She has screened her films internationally at festivals, including South by Southwest, AFI Fest, The Overlook. She's also partnered with Hulu, Sundance Institute, and 20th Century Digital Studios on her two short films, Ride and First Date. So,
this is how I introduce Meredith to people.
So before we get into a little bit more about you, Meredith, because you've also worked on, you've directed Paris Jackson's Gothic film, High Priestess, and your feature film, your feature film, High Priestess, is currently in development. What you got all these things that are going on right now. How is it possible for you to juggle all these things all at one time?
Breathing. I don't know. It's a good question. I think it's a good question because I don't think people talk about the sort of like day-to-day or like spiritual side of like being an artist as your job. I mean, Jackie and I talk about this a lot, but it's like, you really have to like take care of yourself and compartmentalize projects. Like for me, I think it's healthy to have more than one thing going on at once, because if there's one project, like when I'm on set, it's a different story, or like in pre-pro, it's in one, but like I'm in sort of a writing phase right now. And I actually like having more than one project that I'm focusing on, because some days you just can't move the dial forward on one and then you can kind of focus on the other one, which has been sort of my reality lately. I'm about to dive into a rewrite on Monday, so then I'm going to be pretty much in the zone. But it's really, I think all of my projects explore a lot of similar themes, and they teach me about each other in a way. So sure. Yeah, I guess I don't know if I'm doing it well, but that's how I'm trying to.
Yeah.
Well, on top of all that, you are attached to direct a horror film for Universal this year. So I know we can't get too much into that, but wow, holy shit, that's awesome. Congratulations. Now, one thing I've always loved is horror has always been ahead of the curve when it comes to, inclusion. And whenever I get to see women direct or write horror, I feel like it's just a super amazing thing for me, because usually with horror, when you think of women, you either think of the bimbo or the final girl. You don't think about a lot of what the behind the scenes is when it comes to women in horror. So to hear that you're doing direction, to hear that you are producing, to hear that you are writing, because you did write a slasher film recently as well, that's always super important to me as well, to let people know that the women in horror are not just the bimbo or the final girl. A lot of the stuff that happens behind the scenes and behind the camera is done by powerful women as well. So congratulations to you, because that's really awesome. And it's really cool for me to be able to promote that for you, because I'm super proud of you for doing all that.
Thanks for having me, so I can just talk about it, because I think about it all.
And Jackie, I want to talk about you a little bit here for a second. Jackie received her BA in acting from Queen's University in Ontario, Canada. On stage, she has performed in Here at Toronto's Fringe Festival, Spelling Bee for Collective Productions, Chess at Theatre Aquarius, and both Annie and Peter Pan at Oakville Center for Performing Arts. But her first starring role was on Sci-Fi's Ascension.
I feel like this is my college application.
Right. That's actually what we're doing here. I'm actually interviewing you. That's actually what we're doing here. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
No, but what I love about this too is you may also recognize her from You Are Here, The Strain, Bad Samaritan, and the upcoming Pray for the Devil. Now, one question I always ask, because with theater And with film, I feel like, yes, they are both in the same world, but they're also completely different worlds. It's like being a musician. Like when you're a musician, you have the recording an album process, which is this process that you're always in there, you're doing it. But then you have the live shows where you have the instant gratification of being able to watch the audience. And I feel like that's the difference with, film and theater. You have film, which you spend all this time creating, and you have to wait for that gratification to see people's reactions. Well, while you're in theater, you're instantly seeing the gratifications, whether they're loving or hating you, you're seeing it right in front of you. So what do you, I don't want to say what do you prefer, but what can you gain from being in theater and in film?
Well, I think you have to really ask. I think in theater, there's a lot of gratification that comes from an audience, like applause, and lots of people do it for that. And I'm not saying that I didn't start with some sort of semblance of that or have that be a part of what I was looking for. But I think theater for me was always a way to express myself in a way that I wasn't allowed to in my real life. So it's like I could dive into characters that could get angry or hurt. I'm Canadian, and it's very passive aggressive here as a culture in general. So theater for me was a way to express myself. But I think moving over to film, it is hard because there is a change with that you're used to getting after you work, that you really have to love the process. You have to really that action to stop is like a drug that you are chasing because you want to find something unknown in that period, where in theater you're challenging yourself often, but there's a huge rehearsal process that you don't have in film always.
Right.
So the endorphins in film can be really high because you have no idea if what you're going to do is right or wrong. And the more you push it to go outside of what you think is safe, is the better the outcome, in my opinion.
When with theater, you have to be a lot more on the ball, I guess, because you can't be, oh, can we take that again from the top? All right, everybody, forget that just happened. We're going to do this one again from the top.
Oh, yeah. Sorry, I thought you were like, can I ask that question from the top again?
No.
Yeah, you definitely have, you have to be more on the ball, but it almost feels like when you've rehearsed a play for so long, there's a rhythm. Once you get started, you've done this so many times that you're trying to find new avenues. You're less afraid that you don't know your lines because you've said them so many times, even though there is a live audience there. Where in film, and people have different approaches to this, but I really try not to say my lines out loud because I do have a history. I was a figure skater and I have a lot of muscle memory that I don't want to know how I'm going to say something until I'm reacting to the other person there. So there's just a little bit more unknown, I find, that I crave in film and television acting that you don't always get on stage. But there's pros and cons to both. I will say, I think it's the same style of acting. I just think that you're talking to somebody 50 feet away. So you have to use your body more, where you're normally talking to someone like a foot in front of you. It's coming from the same place, but you express it differently.
Right. And I just love the fact that, you can still go back and, still do the theater. And theater acting, I think, is just a very special thing. I could never do it. I'm, the minute I walk out and see people, I'd be like, hey, I'm supposed to imagine you in your underwear. That's cool. But in order for, like I said, you got Meredith, you've been writing your new slasher film. You're about to direct a new horror film. Jackie, we're all so excited for Pray for the Devil. But in order for you to be in horror film or to write horror films or direct horror films, horror had to start for you somewhere, ladies. So now I would like to go back to the past and talk about how horror started for you, your first horror movies. And Meredith, let's start with you. Your first horror movie was?
Bram Stoker's Dracula. I mean, I'm pretty sure it was. I saw a version of Snow White when I was really young that was quite dark that I was obsessed with, but definitely snuck into my parents' bedroom because they would always put a movie on to fall asleep. First movie I remember seeing was The Sandlot, not a horror movie. Second was, also great, Bram Stoker's Dracula. And I'm obsessed with it. I was talking to someone a few days ago, actually, about it, and they recently watched it. They were like, oh, it's not for me. I was like, yeah, I mean, it's like Coppola does like camp. Like he's just so playful in it, and he doesn't take himself seriously, and it's just visually so impressive.
I mean, there's only so many different variations of Dracula you can have and still try to have fun. So I love the fact that he went out and he tried to do something different that hadn't been done yet. That's something that I can appreciate with his retelling of Dracula. So I do appreciate that as well, like you said. So what about you, Jackie? Your first horror movie was?
The first traditional horror film I watched was It, which is terrifying and a huge jump into horror movies. But I steered clear of horror for most of my childhood because of that movie. The first time I was scared in a movie was Troll in Central Park, which is really embarrassing, but I was young and it terrified me. But it, even to this day, I find anything that involves children is like guts me in a way. That creates like true fear in me. But I didn't come into really loving horror until I was old enough, which I'm secretly kind of grateful for. And I think it actually kind of stems to the maturity of my mind, that it took me a certain maturation to understand the psychological aspects of horror and the questions that they were posing. Up until that point, I really was probably watching horror movies to get closer and make out with boys.
I mean, isn't that the reason we all watch horror movies? I mean, still to this day.
Yeah, go to pray for the devil and mac on your sister wife.
I mean, I've been married for 17 years. My wife's like, I'd rather watch the movie.
Yeah. There you go.
So Jackie, do you remember about how old you were the first time that you had seen? And we are talking about the Tim Curry 1990 miniseries, right?
No, I was.
Do you remember about how old you were the first time?
I was in grade 6.
Okay.
So like,
you were
a
young lady.
Doris Day, and like not scary movies. So yeah, it was. I didn't watch a horror movie for like years after I watched it.
Well, I mean, and as a young lady, like you said, you're grade 6, and the first thing you see in this movie is a girl about your age being killed by a clown. That's the first thing you see. So the minute you turn this movie on, a peer is being murdered by a killer clown. So I could definitely see why that would have such an effect on a young lady. I mean, you go right from that to a young boy being killed. So this movie has 2 children's deaths within the first half hour.
It's interesting because I have a younger sister, and the thing that traumatized me the most was the younger brother. And like, I used to have a recurring horror, like a nightmare when I was younger, that like I couldn't take my sister into the deep end in the swimming pool. I wasn't allowed to like swim with her out there. And I would have this dream that I would take her out there and she would drown. And I'm like, that movie really hit home in terms of like,
So when you talk about the little brother, are you talking about the death scene with Georgie? Is that the part that you're talking about? Yeah. It's rough. And what I love about this movie is, I've always said, nothing is scarier than what happens in our minds. And in this movie, when you see the part with Georgie, all you see is the clown and his face coming forward. You don't see anything. The rest is just completely left up to your imagination. Now, let's not forget that this was a 1990 made-for-TV movie, so they didn't really have a huge budget. But I feel like that worked out so well because it's so much scarier.
What's so much scarier about that one than the new one.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. The new one just shows everything, and nothing is left up to your imagination. So, Meredith, I want to bounce back to you here real quick. Bram Stoker's Dracula, like we've talked about, Dracula, the story of Dracula has been told repeatedly, whether it's a romanticized version of the original Dracula or a comedic spin-off, but not completely comedic in Blackula. These stories have been retold many times. But what scene from Bram Stoker's Dracula, the Coppola version, would you say it was that affected you the most?
I mean, I also saw this movie when I must have been like 5 or 6. Like,
oh my God.
My affinity for Winona Ryder stems there as well. And Keanu, I have a poster of my own Private Idaho up right here. The only poster up in my house. I have the Fourth Man, the Paul Verhoeven, in my closet that I need a frame for. But if that tells you anything about how this movie like spiraled into inspiring, many different parts of me. But I think it's the scene, some people say Keanu is like terrible in this movie. And I'm like, no, he understands the assignment. Like right. He understands the assignment. It's so over the top. And it's the scene where let me back up a little bit, because it's why I love this scene is because of sort of everything that leads up to it as well. So, and I might be botching the history of this a little bit, but apparently Coppola had this movie is so important for him because he needed to make money off of it. So it was like a big risk, which makes, talk about like big risks in film, Jackie, you were saying earlier, but there could be a big reward in that. Needed this movie to make money. Like, you know, I think it's something like a week or something crazy before the shoot, he fires his VFX department and like hires someone from his family who was a magician to help him do a lot of this stuff practically, which gives the film a lot of texture. I'm pretty sure that's true. Don't quote me on it, but it's something in that arena. As a filmmaker myself, I always want to go for the practical before you go for the special effects or the CGI. And there's this scene when Keanu first meets Gary Oldman and they're going through the hallway and you see his shadow morph. And that is like what I remember being like, it's a practical effect, and yet it's so scary because you're like, this is a man who looks this way, but like he's actually like a beast, demon, vampire. And that's just like one specific example, but that sort of leads into the scene where he's shaving Keanu, which is like, just that scene stands out to me because it's so simple, but there's so much tension. And you're kind of like, where is this going? And you're like, oh, he's gonna bite him, you know, and he doesn't. Then he like turns around and he like licks the knife, and you're like, that is so much. It's just genius. I mean, Gary Oldman is just every choice he as an actor.
Every choice.
Yeah. Every is specific. And like, I remember being like, oh, that's the movie I'm going to watch. Like, I think Coppola, as like, you know, graphic and over the top as the movie is, like, it really draws out, you know, the reveal of what's to come. You know, but at the end of the film, Gary Oldman's turning into this like huge bat creature, which feels like it's from a movie. But that scene, it's such a lesson for me because I think like it speaks to what you guys are saying, which is like less is more. And people are showing up to see the fangs, so like keep them in their seats. Like, you know, all you need is a little blood, like 10 pages in, then maybe like 20 pages in, we'll meet the hot bride wives, and then, you know, it's like Coppola's just so good at rhythm and reveal. And yeah, that was a very long-winded answer, but I had to explain why that was my favorite scene.
No, I love it, because what I love about this is there's never a right or wrong answer. And no matter how many times I could talk about it, or I could talk about Bram Stoker's Dracula with somebody, I'll never get the stories that you're telling me and the reasons why these stories mean so much to you. So I could talk about the same movie 30 times and have 30 completely different experiences that someone has had with the same film. So that's why I never get bored with this, because it's not a cut and paste. This is this, this is this. I'm learning something different every time I talk to somebody, even if we're talking about the same movie. So what about you, Jackie? We talked a little bit about, you know, the little girl and Georgie, but what scene would you say from the 1990 It affected you the most?
When the blood pours out of the book.
Even right before that, one of my favorite parts, and I wish they would have done this in the new one, when he's looking at the photo album and he's like, oh, Georgie, and then the picture winks at him. You know, and then
like
he
that
throws
whole
it, it starts
scene,
bleeding.
that whole thing is like, it's so crazy because I've never thought about this connection before, but like going back to that nightmare, my sister would drown, come back up and be like, you killed me, and then like go back down. And it's like, that's the wink. Like him in the book and like winking at him, like that whole, and then the blood, it was just like, I haven't rewatched it also. Like it really it's an uncomfortable film for me.
Yeah.
We'll watch Jackie.
I understand and I respect that.
Yeah. What did you say, Meredith? We'll rewatch it?
Where we face our fears. We'll watch it. That it also really disturbed me. I think again, I walked in on my cousin or someone watching it, and like, isn't there a scene where there's just like bones and blood left in the raincoat or something?
No.
Okay, maybe that's the new one. I don't know. It in general freaks me out.
No, but we'll watch it. We'll watch it together. You can hold my hand. We'll make out. I'm kidding.
I just got a lot more happy about this. I don't know. No, I'm totally joking. But you guys need to let me know how you feel about it when you guys do watch it, because I'm very excited to hear about a rewatch of it. So we talked about which scene affected you the most from your first horror movies and how much they mean to you. But real quick, my little buddy Ghostface here has a question for you. I'm going to throw a little bit of a curveball at you here for a second. I'm going to start with you, Jackie. So Meredith, you're going to get to be a cheater, pumpkin eater, and you're actually going to get to think this out a little bit. But Jackie, what's your favorite scary movie? So we'll start with you, Jackie. What is your favorite horror movie of all time?
Probably Hereditary.
You know what? I've never, besides maybe the first Saw film, I've never had a theater experience like I had with Hereditary. We were able to go see it opening night, and I don't want to spoil anything, but when the scene happened, you felt the life leave that room. Everybody was just,
it is like, talk about another film that's like, this is also screwed up that my boyfriend will rewatch this movie. I'm like, that scene is not rewatchable for me. Like, no. Yeah.
For me, and then the scene where the brother's in the classroom and he's slamming his head on the desk and he's got his arm picked up, like that one messed me up. And then like, I think that Toni Collette is the most underrated actress of this generation. I don't think that she gets the credit she deserves, no matter what she's in.
Have you seen Staircase?
No, I have not. And people keep telling me to see it. I need to see it.
She's amazing. I don't know how underrated. I think everyone knows how freaking awesome she is. I hope. But like, she is, you don't see her acting. That's how amazing she is. She's just like,
well, it doesn't matter what she's in. Whatever she's in, she steals the show. Even back to The Sixth Sense, you know, even then, like she completely steals the show in that movie. Like I'm a huge Toni Collette stan. Like I love her to death. And I think that no matter what she's in, I'm like, you could be my mom, please, right now.
Yeah. I know.
You know, like, please. So we know now your favorite horror movie. So now Meredith, what's your favorite scary movie? What is your favorite horror movie?
So, you know, I was going through the Rolodex. You said Hereditary, which is up there for me. I think, you know, the Last Boys in the Ring, like, you know, are formative to me. The Ring and Hereditary are probably the most scared I have been in a film. I rewatched Hereditary recently for research, and it put me in a weird place for like a week after. Yeah. God love Ari Aster. But this is kind of a wild card, but I think my favorite is The Changeling from 1980.
Very nice.
Yeah, I saw it. So there's an incredible movie theater in New York called Metrograph that does like just wonderful retrospectives. I saw True Lies with Jamie Lee Curtis and Arnold Schwarzenegger like 2 nights ago. Had the time of my life. But I went to see The Changeling because I was like, oh, this is like, you know, a haunted house movie, but like the quintessential haunted house ghost story. And there's something about, like, how do I describe this? Like, I think some of these movies like have a texture that like is like spiritual, where I'm like, I can't put my finger on why they're so eerie. Hereditary is the same way, but like, I think The Changeling, it has like everything that makes a great ghost story, like a ghost that's like emotional, sad and tragic, a great leading man performance, a house that's just gothic and eerie, and like, you know, it's like if anyone else had written that script or directed it, it wouldn't be the same. And I think what frightened me most, honestly, is getting home and I was like researching it, which like I rarely do. And it's based on a true story. Like the writer stayed in a hotel, and like, I don't want to give anything away, but like, it's very much based on his own experience. And you're like, that's why it is extra creepy, is because it's so specific. And there's something in the way that like the choices that it's like, this is coming from someplace inside you as a director. And we all know Ari Aster is like that as a director, you know, even like Joel Schumacher, I'm mispronouncing it, that did Lost Boys. Like he's a filmmaker that definitely brings a lot of his personality to movies. Joel Schumacher did, I'm pronouncing that right, did Lost Boys. He passed away recently. I'm pretty sure. Anyway, I don't know if you guys have seen The Changeling, but it's pretty magnificent.
Yeah, it is Joel Schumacher that did The Lost Boys. I just wanted to look before there was one time in the 90s I was wrong, so it could happen again, but I just double checked that we are good. It is Joel Schumacher. So, ladies, I've had an amazing time learning how horror started for you. This has been truly an honor for me to be able to work with two people that I both look up to and inspire to live my life like, because you two are just beating ass out there in the horror world and in film in general. So before I let you ladies go, though, I do want to say real quick, for anybody that's watching that isn't already doing so, I have all their social media links down here in the description. So you don't have to go far. You can follow them there and you can stay up to date on everything that they're doing. So you don't have to wait for any Sledgehammer updates on that. You can get the word right from the horse's mouth. So make sure you're following these amazing ladies on social media. Now, before I let you guys go, we always end this with a skull count. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to go back to your first horror movie and we're going to rank this movie, but we're not ranking it on acting, production, score, direction, nothing like that. What we're going to do here is strictly rank this movie on how much it affected you on first viewing. So Meredith, let's start with you. We're going back to Bram Stoker's Dracula. So 0 skulls being not effective, 5 being extremely effective. You can use half and quarter skulls anywhere in the middle. What would your ranking of Bram Stoker's Dracula be?
I mean, it's got to be 5. It's my second favorite film of all time. It's got to be 5.
And it definitely pushed you into the direction that you're heading now. And usually I know the answer to these, but according to my script, I got to ask the question anyway. So we know that you have 5 skulls for Bram Stoker's Dracula. So Jackie, what about you?
Like I said, full skeletons for it.
I figure when it's giving you nightmares as a kid that you're living with, it's definitely up there. So like I said, ladies, it truly is an honor to be able to work with you. And I hope that you guys are following them on social media. Please don't go anywhere, ladies. I do have a couple more questions for you. Right. Everybody else, as always, keep talking horror, stay what you are, and we'll see you guys soon.